Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 mini-series with the New York Yankees. And if you're new to the channel, if you've just found us over the last couple of weeks with OOTP 25 and its recent release, first of all, thanks for joining us. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, would sincerely appreciate that. We just concluded a long series with an expansion team in Buffalo in OOTP 24. We also put out OOTP tutorials, and in the next couple of weeks we're going to be starting our long play in OOTP 25 with a franchise to be named later, although not that later at this point. Our Yankees are having a solid season so far. We're half game behind in the AL East, and we are 3 games up on the final 2 wildcard spots in the American League. So a decent position as we begin August. We did just get through the trade deadline, added a couple of players who we think can help. Ryan Helsley, picked him up in the last year of his contract from St. Louis. Think he can definitely be a big asset to our bullpen. We've got him in a setup role. Honestly, I'm even considering moving him into more of a pure stopper role, kind of a co-closer along with David Bednar, perhaps. We also made a trade for Michael Conforto. He's only played 1 game for us. He's 0 for 3, but you can see by his stats here, he has not been very good this season. That said, we have struggled against right-handed pitching, so Conforto gives us a 4th left-handed bat here. You can see against right-handed pitching in our lineup, and we're hoping to perhaps catch a little bit of lightning in the bottle with Mr. Conforto. If it doesn't work out, we recently, when we picked him up, sent the left fielder and left-handed hitting outfielder Christopher Familia back down to AAA. He hadn't performed incredibly well this year, but if Conforto really doesn't work out, we'll bring Familia back up. Aaron Judge is having a fantastic season, 298 average, 37 homers, 90 ribbies, and Juan Soto is not far behind him, 290, 24, and 65. Those two have been the cornerstones of our offense year to date. Judge is DHing against right-handed pitching. We still do play him in right field a couple days a week against left-handed pitching to give Soto a little extra time off. Goal is to keep those 2 players who are the cornerstones of our lineup healthy and well. Otherwise, we're in a pretty good shape as far as injuries. You can see Everson Pereira and Gleyber Torres both dealing with very minor day-to-day injuries, and Garrett Cole is about to come back from an IL stint as well. So conceivably, 3 days from now, we could be perfectly healthy. Last year, we were in first place much of August and well into September before really choking down the stretch and missing the playoffs. The goal this year is to ensure that we get into the playoffs, and if we're able to do it as AL East division winners, even better. And it's been a pretty mediocre start to the month of August for our Yankees. We took 2 out of 3 at home against Arizona, but then we lost 2 out of 3 in Tampa, and we've lost the first 2 out of 3 in Minnesota. Have another big series at Tampa coming up next week, followed by 3 against Baltimore. Taking a look at the standings, very tight between Tampa, Baltimore, and us, all separated by 1 game. Baltimore and our Yankees are both 4 games up on the White Sox and the Astros for the final wild card spot. So although we're in the midst of quite a battle in the division, we have opened up a small amount extra on the teams for the wild card, which is positive given that we haven't been playing particularly well. Can see Judge and Soto are playing particularly well, ranking 1st and 2nd in the American League in OPS here on August 10th. And it's been a good week for the Yankees here, especially considering the importance of the games that we were playing against Tampa and the Orioles. took the final game of the series at the Twins. Then we took 2 out of 3 in Tampa Bay, and we won the first 2 in Baltimore. So as we sit here on August 17th, we've got a 1-game lead on the Rays and a 4-game lead on Baltimore. And the Rays are 5.5 up for a wild card. So feeling pretty good about how we're sitting. Looks like Judge is slowing down a bit. Hasn't had a homer or a ribby over the past week. And he only has a very small advantage over Soto now in the OPS race. And unfortunately, as good as we were feeling a week ago, we're feeling bad now. We lost the final game against Baltimore, so we split that series 2-2. We split a 1-game series at home against the Phillies, but we've lost 2 of the first 3 to Toronto. So not playing horrible, but not playing great. But unfortunately for us, the teams we are competing with are playing a lot better than us. The Orioles have won 6 in a row now, so 1 game out in the division, tied with Baltimore, a game behind Tampa, 5.5 up on the final wild card spot. So still feeling like we've got a good chance of getting this team into the playoffs. You can see Judge has gone ice cold. He's been stuck at 40 homers and 98 ribbies for a couple of weeks now. His batting average has dropped to 267, so he has really been struggling here in the month of August when he had a chance at a historic season when the month began. Certainly him chasing 62 or 61 or even 60 is very remote at this point. And we ended up dropping 3 of 4 in Toronto, but since then we've taken 2 out of 3 in Miami and the first 2 at home against Texas. 2 games left in the month at this point. So feeling good about where we sit. We're in 3rd technically, but only 1 game behind both Baltimore and Tampa Bay. And we're up 5.5 games on the last wild card spot. So still in a pretty good situation as far as the standings, but the little injuries are starting to creep up a bit here. So it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. Ryan Helsley, we had tried him in a stopper role, and it's been a disaster on every level. His ERA is 8.31 now with the Yankees, and now he's out with elbow inflammation for 2 weeks, so certainly going to put him into a more traditional setup role when he comes back, hopefully around mid-September. Also waiting on a potential injury from Tommy Edman, hamstring tendonitis, going to be out for a week. Probably we'll put him on the IL just because we're also potentially going to be short a player. Dalton Varsho with a strained oblique, and he's been playing a bit better of late. He's got the average up to 261, his 16 homers and 38 ribbies and 257 at-bats. Has had a lot of injury issues this year, but he's put up a 117 WRC plus when he's been healthy. Supposedly the oblique's only going to have a minimal impact on hitting, throwing, and running, but since it's going to impact everything, probably going to try to be cautious and put him on the IL. The issue is that our backup center fielder, Everson Pereira, we were cautious with him and put him on the IL. He's healed now from a relatively minor injury, so we might have Varsho try to gut it out for the next couple of days till Pereira is ready to come back from the IL, and then we'll also be at the point where we have September roster expansion, even if Pereira is not quite ready, at which point we'll probably put Varsho on the 10-day IL with the hope that he'll be back before the end of the season and hopefully for the playoffs. And we'll be going for a sweep against Texas in the 4th game of that series today on Monday, which is good news. Still a game behind 3rd place in the division, but we're up 6.5 on the final wild card spot, so feeling like we're in a pretty good position. Kind of interesting news here. We mentioned we were trying to get Dalton Varsho just to September roster expansion, and Pereira coming back off the IL, so they could take over for him in center, and we could put him on the IL for 10 days. And Varsho, despite dealing with that oblique, was the AL Player of the Week, 11 for 22. with a couple homers and 4 ribbies. So he's gutting it out right now. I do think that when we get through today's game and to September roster expansion, we'll probably put him on the IL just to be cautious with him. Certainly would love to win the AL East, but the main goal is to get this team into the playoffs and to ensure that we're as healthy as possible at that time. So hopefully we can survive not having him in the lineup for potentially a good chunk of September as we try to get him back to 100%. And it's going to be kind of an interesting September roster expansion for the Yankees here. We did just put Varsho onto the IL, so we actually had 5 spots to fill. And unlike a lot of teams, we didn't really have a lot of prospects to bring up. I guess the most prospecty guy that we did bring up is the pitcher Will Warren, who's 27 years old at this point. He was 9-8 with a 4.65 ERA down in Scranton Wilkes-Barre, so wasn't even that great down there, and certainly doesn't seem to be much else than a back of the bullpen kind of guy. But we brought him up, and then other than that, we really supplemented with veterans that we had signed to minor league contracts who have basically spent most or all of the year in AAA for us. Brought up Tim Anderson to play in the infield to give us a little more depth there. We brought Peraza back up a few days ago when we put Edman on the IL just to be cautious with him. And then Alex Call, Mark Canna, and one other player were brought up. Oh, Josh Bell, that's right, the first baseman. So a lot of veterans who are experienced, who were willing to sign minor league contracts with us because they couldn't find another job. So veteran heavy. Pereira will be taking the place of likely one of the outfielders tomorrow when he's back. But we've got a lot of depth and kind of a lot of proven performers. Don't think that any of these guys are normally going to be in our starting lineup, but could come through with some big pinch hits, hopefully. And Anderson will certainly give us a nice glove in the infield to potentially be a defensive substitute at times if we need one, and give the likes of Volpe, Peraza, and Torres days off from time to time. And we've gotten the month of September off to a pretty good start. Lost their first game of the month at Colorado, but then won 2 in a row there to claim the series. And we've won the first 2 on the road in San Francisco. Still have 1 game left out on the West Coast. And then we've got a home series against Detroit, and then a big 3-game series against Baltimore. Taking a look at the standings here on the 7th, we are in a flat-footed tie with Baltimore for first in the division, 9-1 in our last 10, and we're both a game and a half up on the Rays. Whichever team between Baltimore and us wouldn't win the division right now has a 9.5 game lead on the final wild card spot, so certainly no guarantees. The magic number is 18 for Baltimore, 17 for us, as we've played 2 more games than the Orioles at this point. So we've still got work to do, but hopefully over the next couple of weeks we can at least clinch a wild card spot and then see how we fare in this 3-team race for the AL East title. And we made it to the middle of September. Ended up being a solid week for the Yankees. Won the last game to sweep the Giants. Took 2 out of 3 against Detroit. And we split the first 2 against Baltimore. So the rubber game today before we go on the road at Toronto and then at Cleveland. Taking a look at where we are in the standings right now. We're a game and a half behind the Orioles, who are 9-1 in their last 10. We just broke a 9-game winning streak of theirs, so they've surged to the front of the division. That said, we're 9.5 games up on the last wild card. Our magic number is down to 9. So if things go well over the next week, it's conceivable that we will have clinched a playoff berth by next Monday. Soto and Judge are 1-2 in OPS this year. Judge still leading the league in homers, second in runs batted in. Blake Snell now leading the league in strikeouts, and David Bednar is tied for second in the league with 36 saves. And health-wise, I don't want to jinx it, but we're in decent shape now. Helsley, we just brought him back off of the disabled list, so Varsho still recovering from that strained oblique. We're trying to piece through these last couple weeks of the season without him, and we'll hopefully have him back healthy and well for the playoffs. And it wasn't a great week for the Yankees with just about 2 weeks left in the season. We did take the series against Baltimore, which was good, and then we won 2 out of 3 at Toronto. But since then, we've dropped the first 2 of a 3-game series in Cleveland. We've got San Diego and then a home series against Cleveland coming up next week. After that, we'll be finishing up in the month of October at Boston and at Kansas City. So we're getting very low on home dates at this point. Just have 6 left against the Padres in Cleveland. Taking a look at the standings here. 2 games behind Tampa Bay and Baltimore in the division now. Tampa 10-0 in their last 10. And the Orioles have been playing solid ball as well. Our magic number to clinch a playoff berth is down to just 2. We're 7.5 up on the Mariners for the final wild card spot, so we will likely be in the postseason, and we could clinch it as early as today. But the goal is still to ultimately win the division. We'll see what happens. We don't have any games left against the teams that we're chasing, but we still have more than enough games left to get by those teams if we play well. And although we've dropped 2 out of 3 since we checked in, the Yankees have punched our ticket for the playoffs. We're up 7 on the final wild card spot, and we're up 11 on the Red Sox at this point. So set there. Unfortunately, we're 4 behind in the division now, and we've got to overcome reasonably large deficits on not just the Orioles, but also being 3 behind Tampa if we're going to get into first. So at this point, 86-66 record with 10 games to go. I would think probably got to be 9-1 or 10-0 to have any chance at the division. So we're going to have to be almost perfect the rest of the way. Speaking of almost perfect, Aaron Judge just hit his 50th home run, has 121 ribbies on the year. Really nice bounce back season for him after an injury-plagued season a year ago. We've used him primarily as DH this year, and that has helped keep him healthy. At this point, we just want this team to be healthy and well when we get into the playoffs. Varsho only a couple days back from recovering from that oblique. So with Peraza with a sprained ankle that's going to impact him for 5 weeks, that's certainly a significant loss for us. He's been our starting shortstop most of this year. Fortunately, we can pivot Volpe over there, and we do have Tim Anderson up, as I mentioned. But it's been a solid year from Peraza, 248 average, but 16 homers, 65 ribbies, 23 for 23 stealing bases, 91 WRC plus, so he's been competent offensively, and he's put up a 3.1 WAR with some good defense as well. So certainly disappointing that he's not going to be around for the playoffs, at least unless we make a very long run in the playoffs. But think that with the likes of Volpe, Edman, and Anderson in the infield, as well as Cabrera, we should be more than functional. And unfortunately, we're not playing our best baseball of the year, even though we have clinched playoff spot. We took 2 out of 3 at home against San Diego, but we've lost 2 in a row now versus Cleveland. Final home game of the regular season will be today against them. And then we're going to finish off with 3 at Boston and 3 at Kansas City before the season finishes up. Taking a look at the standings, we're now 5 behind Tampa and 4 behind Baltimore. So probably have to be perfect to have any chance of winning the division. And honestly, even if we're perfect the rest of the way, going 7-0 in our last 7 games, that only gets us to 94 wins. So Tampa only needs 3 and Baltimore only needs 4 to get the division over us. So we'll see how this last week of the season goes. I don't necessarily have high expectations. Certainly want to get this team over 90 wins and would love to get to, say, 92. At least feel that we're playing some good baseball over the last week of the season if we're able to go 5-2 or better. And another injury here in the final days of the season. Center fielder Everson Pereira, day-to-day with back stiffness for 1 to 2 weeks. No need to put him on the IL. We've got plenty of players on the roster. We'll sit him the final 2 games of the year that are coming up, and then we'll see whether or not it makes sense to put him onto the playoff roster. Had a big disappointment in his season this year. Last year he was so good as a rookie. 277 average, 24 homers, 71 ribbies, 148 WRC plus. This year in 394 at-bats, oftentimes being our starting center fielder because Varsho has been so banged up. 21 homers, 51 ribbies. The batting average has fallen to 208, and he's posted just an 85 WRC plus while barely being above replacement level. So disappointing season for Pereira. He'll sit out these last couple games of the year. We're standing at 89 and 71 right now, so obviously we are not going to win the division. We are going to be 3rd place, and we are going to be the second wild card team. So we are going to end up with a AL East matchup against whoever loses the division between Tampa Bay and Baltimore. We'll be playing against them, and they will have the home field advantage against us. So it's certainly not an optimal situation, but we'll try to make the best of it. So it was an up and down last week of the season for the Yankees. We took the final game of the series against Cleveland. Then we lost 3 in a row in what were meaningless games for the Red Sox in Fenway. So given that we were still playing for something then, didn't feel good at all. Won the final 3, though, on the road against Kansas City. So as I mentioned, we're going to be playing at Baltimore, a 3-game series for the opportunity to move on to the ALDS. Certainly not the perfect situation for us to be on the road for all 3 of those games. Finish the year at 91 and 71. Aaron Judge, 56 homers and a league best 135 ribbies. He really was strong down the stretch. Soto and Judge 1-2 in the American League in OPS. Blake Snell led the league in strikeouts, and David Bednar ends up 3rd in the league in saves. So really happy with what Judge did this year. He did miss some games, only played in 144 games, and still led the league in homers and ribbies. Honestly, if he was able to have played another 10 or 15 games, there's no telling what kind of numbers he would put up, but the main thing is that he is healthy and well for the playoffs. He also led the league in slugging percentage and WRC+, so would expect him to get a fair amount of votes for American League MVP after a vintage Aaron Judge season here in 2026. And with that, we will call it an episode. We will be back with the playoffs next time around. I'm going to give some thought for our playoff roster between now and then. We know Peraza won't be around. Got to figure out what we want to do, if anything, with Everson Pereira. But we finally got this Yankees team back into the playoffs, a 91 and 71 record, and who knows what can happen. We'll certainly be the underdogs on the road against Baltimore, who were 3 games better than us in the division this year, but anything can happen in a 3-game series, and we'll hope that anything that can happen will mean an upset for our Yankees. And we'll find out whether or not that comes true in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.